It is testimony time, guys. Listen up. God is good, and this is a testimony to what God has done. So growing up, I was good at a lot of different things, but I never really knew exactly like what my thing was. I was always like, I was close, but just never good enough, at a lot of different things in life. The effect that had on me, I think, is that I struggled with really knowing like what was I really truly good at. And when you don't have a lot of like encouragement around you either, you start to wonder. When you get into abusive relationships and you get treated a certain way, again, you start to believe that you're no good. When you're making poor choices in life and you're feeling shame and guilt about those choices, you start believing that you're no good. You start believing that you have no value. And so this was a big part of my story and why I struggled to really know what I was meant to do in this life. I got into some abusive relationships pretty quickly. Like, I was 16 when I had my first experience of being hit, from a boyfriend. I know that I wasn't innocent in all of these relationships, but that was my first experience. And right up until I was maybe like 20, maybe like 27 ish, I was in and out of abusive relationships pretty much. From about the age of 27, fast forward like another 7 years or so, another 8 years, that's when I really started thinking about my purpose in life. I started praying and I started asking God, what are my gifts? Like, what am I meant to do? Because Lord, I have no idea. I can't fully remember the order of all of these confirmations. Maybe the order is a little bit wrong, but nevertheless, I don't think the order really matters, but I'm just going to explain some of the confirmations that I received. Sometimes I like to read articles on my phone and, like blogs or whatever you call them. And just randomly, one day I started seeing ads for studying to become a teacher. Like, these were just ads from the Ministry of Education and I think like study institutions. But the thing was, like, ads pop up all the time, right? I wasn't currently looking at anything like that, and it wasn't on my mind at all. But these ads, they kept popping up and they kept grabbing my attention every single time. Because that was too, like, I guess for me, it wasn't really enough of a confirmation. Sometimes I think, well, maybe this is just me reading too much into it. Maybe this is just my own thoughts. I just carried on. And then one day I was helping out at our church. I was helping out in our Sunday school. I had been a part of this church for like 5 years or so, and never, ever, ever had I heard any of the children call whoever was looking after them teacher. But that particular day, I had like several different kids. They kept asking me, are you my teacher? They were calling me teacher. Some of them were like, teacher, teacher, and they're like talking to me, and I'm like, what? Again, I felt like it was just being highlighted to me and something was trying to grab my attention. It was almost like, I guess it felt like the Holy Spirit just kind of tapping me on my shoulder and being like, psst, listen to this. I just couldn't shake that feeling like God was trying to highlight something to me. And so I walked away, and I remember praying to God again. And when I say praying, I'm just talking to God, just talking to Him the same way that I'm talking to you right now. And I asked Him, I said, God, if this is you, like, I'm sorry, but I'm gonna need like more confirmation. Like, I'm gonna need to hear somebody else say the words, Sade, you have a gift of teaching. If this is what you're trying to tell me, I need someone else to say those words, because what I didn't want was to start going down a track that God didn't call me to. I wanted it to be His voice. I wanted it to be the plan that He had for me, you know, not just my own thoughts or my own wants or my own will. I wanted it to be God. And so I asked Him if He could please do that for me. About 3 weeks later, maybe, roughly, I can't quite remember, but it was a little bit after that when I had asked God if He could confirm it again. I was at an event at church. Well, it was called School of Ministry, and it was just a class basically where you could go to learn a little bit more about the Bible, learn more about God. And so I was going like once a week, just whenever I could make it, I was attending. And at this particular meeting, I ended up speaking to another sister on the break. I shared with her about how I had been asking God to please show me what is my gift, and I asked Him if He could confirm it in this way. And you know, she looked at me and she was like, oh well, you know, let's see. But in that moment I didn't really know why I was sharing it with her. Later, when the session had finished, I went to speak to the pastor, and as he was sitting down, he's talking, and what he said to me was, he said the words, I believe you have a gift of teaching. And in that moment, I looked at the sister that I was talking to in the break. She looked at me, and I don't even know the look that was on my face, but I must have been like beaming. She was looking at me like, and she goes, that's your confirmation. She said, that's your confirmation. You know, I asked God for a very specific confirmation, something that was not going to be easy, you know, to have happen, you know. And He did it. He confirmed it. I was just in so much awe of God. And after that, even after that, at least I think it was after that, again, I get the orders mixed up, but there was another prophecy that I was given. There was a prophet who came to our church, and he had a word for some of us. I was sitting next to my daughter, and the prophet had a word for her. He was talking about teaching. He said that, oh, you know, yeah, you've got a gift of teaching. This is something that you're going to enjoy doing. He had that word for her. But I'm sitting right next to her, and I'm thinking, I feel like that's for me. But anyway, that was the word he had for my daughter. And then he had a word for me, and he used the same word. He said, teach. And he said, you've got gifts that you have never even used. And I believe now, at the time when he said that, I was a bit sad, because I thought, oh man, this is like what I don't want to do. I don't want to bury the gifts, you know. But I feel like what he was also like saying was like, there's so much in you that you have to share that you haven't even scratched the surface yet. He paused, he's like, you teach your children, don't you? Like, you teach them every day, yeah. And he's just sort of nodding his head. But again, that word teach, it came up. Another time I was at children's church, and I was in the room setting up. My husband was there with me at the time, which again, that was kind of like, that didn't always happen. But also what usually doesn't happen is other people coming into the room and like just sort of hanging out in there. Like, they might stop in and say hi, but everyone's usually out, you know, in the auditorium or just sort of congregating outside. But a sister came in, and for some reason my husband, he asked her if she had a word for us, like just random as. We were just having normal chit chat, like, hi, hello, how are you? Oh, hey, do you have a word? Like, it was so random. But you know what? She did. God gave her a word in that moment, and I think she had a word for my husband, she had a word for me, and she had a word for my older son. And she spoke to my husband first, and then she said something about my older son, and they were spot on. You know, what God was showing her in those moments, it was spot on. And I was like, yeah, like, this is awesome. Then when she came to me, she was looking at me, and she was kind of like laughing. She was like, oh my gosh, sis, like, I can see teacher all over you. And she's like, oh man, like, this is your training ground. This sister knows nothing about the prior confirmations that I had. She knew nothing about, you know, what was going on. This was totally like random, only it's not random, it's God. When she said that, I was just like, oh wow, I was blown away once again by what God does. Absolutely blown away. I started looking back at my previous jobs, and none of them were like teaching roles. None of them. I'm not a qualified teacher, nothing like that. But what I did notice, and again, I feel like this is God highlighting it to me, I noticed that in most of the roles that I've had, like, I've had a few different jobs at different places, I would be the person that the manager or someone would ask to train people. I did this at so many different places. I would be the one that was training new staff, or maybe it's existing staff but they're just coming into a new role. Thing was, I really enjoyed doing it. You know, I had fun training these people because I was using my gift. I was walking in, you know, the gifts that God has given me. It was there all along, you know. It's just sometimes we need help. We need a little bit of help to see. And so I do just want to say shout out to one of my favorite aunties, because she requested this video. Maybe it was like, you know, just to help me out, I don't know, but I know she also would have wanted to hear it. So shout out to my auntie. Yeah guys, so that is just one of the testimonies about what God has done in my life, and I hope it encourages you, because I tell you what, I am a nobody, and if God can do it for me, he will most definitely do it for you.